Hi, everyone. It's good to see you all. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm looking forward to telling you the story of Lola's Tapestry and some excerpts about my ongoing traveling show, The Fragile Bee. This is the space where the tapestry will be installed. It is installed now, but as we proceed, you'll see how things come to life. In 2016, Lola Traficante, the head of grounds at Scripps at the time, redeveloped the landscape on the medians of Platt Boulevard. She invited many people to come and volunteer to help to plant native drought-tolerant plants in this area. It was so beautiful one day in March in 2016 that I was encouraged to take photographs with my phone before I got into my car to drive home. The light was so vivid, it was so beautiful, and things were just blooming. Later on that year, in August, I had the opportunity to visit what was under construction at the time, the new dorm, which was called New Hall, and now is called Schow Hall. And Kristen Driscoll is the architect, and she took me and Mary McNaughton on a tour of the building, and we admired all the arabesque Moroccan kinds of touches that were being utilized. And you can even see through the screen here that there's no longer any foliage on the road outside. This is the construction for the Georgia B. Ritter living room, which is the space where the tapestry was eventually installed. And the medians on Platt Boulevard were removed. New landscaping was done because Harvey Mudd and Scripps both needed more parking for their students and faculty. Kristen had identified a few places in the new dorm that she thought could definitely benefit from some artwork. And I chose this image from the median of the pictures that I had taken as a starting point. Initially, I thought it could be broken up into 6 pieces. They would each be photographs glazed with plexi and installed on the wall in this kind of a window format. I talked to Mary McNaughton about this, and she said, you know, there's a real wonderful tradition here of tapestries at Scripps College. Maybe we should think about something like that. So I made some modifications and chose this image. And I knew that there was a business in Oakland called Magnolia Editions, and that they had the ability to take a digital image and turn it into a woven tapestry. Don Farnsworth is the creator of this, and many of the things they do there are related to printmaking. In fact, he says, the tapestries begin as one thing, a digital composition, comprised of drawn, painted, or photographed elements, visible on a computer screen as a series of pixels. And they end as another, as a 3-dimensional textile. By virtue of this transformation, they are, at least in spirit, part of the printmaking tradition. And as I go through my slides with you, you will see a little bit of how that process translated from this pixeled digital image to the tapestry. I heightened the images, the colors in the tapestry, because I wanted it to be highly vivid. But the young man at Magnolia that I was working directly with, Nicholas Price, told me that things change from the photographic look to the tapestry look because we're going from light to thread. So he created this palette, which is done by values, to first establish the colors that would be drawn from the photograph, then identified a suite of threads that would be used for the warp. The colored threads are cotton, and the black ones are wool. And actually, I meant the weft. And then a woven pattern was developed so that we could see the way the colors would interact with the warp which is Travera, a synthetic kind of an off-white colored thread. And this was then woven into the palette of colors so that we could identify which ones were being used. They all have numbers, and make some adjustments to that. So we started off here, and Nicholas and I worked over the internet, sending images back and forth as we made color adjustments. I thought this was too yellow and too pale, so we added a little more purple at the top, a little bit of red. Well, it was still not bold enough, so we added a lot more red. I thought, well, that's too much red. So we extracted some and went back to some yellow in the lower foreground here. And then in order to balance it a little better, we added some red in those groups of yellow flowers. And then finally, a little bit of orange up at the top where the red ones are. So it seemed to have a better balance for me. It's much lighter than the original photograph, but this was necessary for translating it into the tapestry. Computers and tapestries are not as far removed from one another as one might think. The perforated punch cart system used to create the first computers in the early 20th century was developed by Joseph Marie Jacquard in 1801, not for a computer, but for the loom, which now bears his name. And Jacquard looms were also used by the nuns many years ago to weave the tapestries like the Unicorn Suite. The Magnolia Editions tapestries are created using these machines, digital Jacquard looms receiving instructions from the modern version of the perforated punch card. In this case, digital weave files of extraordinary complexity are sent directly from Magnolia Editions in Oakland to the looms in a small mill in Belgium, which is very proprietary. Don Farnsworth won't tell you where it is or the name of it. Each pixel of the weave file represents a weave structure. Each unique weave structure, a combination of colored threads, results in a unique color. And you can see that weave palette on the bottom here and the sample of the tapestry folded up on top of it. The gamut of available colors provided by two Jacquard heads, the devices which lace warp threads over or under the weft, 17,800 warp threads, and the sophisticated proprietary color matching techniques were developed by Don Farnsworth. So for the final color editing, I went up to Oakland for the day to work with Nicholas and to compare the colors in the sample with the colors on the palette and make some minor adjustments. So here are some details of that sample so that you can actually see the texture a little bit better and how it translated from the photograph to the threads. Here's another part of that particular sample. Unlike reproduction tapestries and traditional hand-woven work, which divide an image into solid areas of color, these tapestries use a mosaic-like network of color combinations that the viewer's eyes perceive at a distance as modulations of color. This method could be likened to pointillism, in which tiny dots or points of color are optically blended. Pointillism is typically associated with painting, but the origin of the method lies in the work of Eugène Chevreul, a French chemist who served as director of the Les Gobelins tapestry works in Paris. Chevreul developed the color wheel and was the first to formulate what he called simultaneous contrast. Many of you, I think, have learned about that if you've studied painting. This is the notion that the eye perceives a particular thread's color based on the color of its surrounding threads. So this is something else that's happening here optically. And here's Nicholas and I, and once again, another sample close-up detail of the texture so that you can get a sense of its tactility and its physicality. Well, the tapestry arrived from Belgium to Magnolia Editions in Oakland. It's 6 by 12 feet. And as you can see, the edges have not been finished. So the next step before it arrived at Scripps was to lay it out here on this table. And this woman who's, I'm sorry, cut off a little, is the specialist that folds all the edges under and binds them properly. And in the lower front of the tapestry, you might see what looks like a little white rectangle with some blue on it. Well, it turns out there was just a piece of paper, a piece of trash in the garden photograph that I was using. And I thought, well, I'm going to leave it there because this is kind of a natural reality. But I decided to put a secret stamp on it. And I think you can maybe make out the fact that the La Simuse is inscribed here in this little piece of discarded paper. And here she is, and here are her arms and throwing the seeds. So kind of just a secret little touch that if you ever get to see the tapestry in person, you can try and find it. So here they are with the final measurements at Magnolia. And you can see the nice binding work that she's done, folding in the edges and completing it. And now she's preparing to roll it up to ship it down to Scripps. They also made a beautiful label for it, which I signed when it arrived. So the proposal for the tapestry happened in 2017. So the original photographs were 2016. The dorm was being built in 2016 and being finished in 2017. And I made a proposal to the dean and the treasurer about installing this. And then it was approved, and it basically took about a year for it to be finished. So I went up to Oakland in September of 2017 for the finalizing, and took quite a few months to finish. And when it arrived at Scripps, it was April. Here she is again, rolling it up. That's a Chuck Close on the back. That's actually a tapestry of a Chuck Close drawing, FYI. And here it has arrived, and we are in the living room of Schow Hall and going to have the installation here. So now this is April 2018, just in time for Alumni Weekend, I might add. So now we've unrolled it. We're flattening it out to make sure it's uncurled, where a hanging device did come with it, a big rod that went on the wall first, and then 2 rods go down the sides. They slip into these sleeves that have been made, and they have weights at the bottom to help the tapestry hang straight. So here I am with it, very excited to be there that day. I'm signing the label. So we have a permanent record and the actual size I put on there. And here are some of the men from facilities getting things ready. That's Kevin up on the ladder on the left, and the rod away from his shoulder is what was installed, because that's what the top of the tapestry will hang from. And they're getting ready to pick it up. And here it is on the wall, and you can see it in its fullness. And the translation is kind of amazing, I think. Here's how it looks in the room. And the beautiful interior garden is to the left. Now, one of the things that's so wonderful about this being a tapestry and not a painting or a photograph is that it added necessary acoustical cushioning for playing the piano, which is there in the living room, and students do come in and use it and practice as they would like. And that will cushion the sound, so it will be richer and fuller, in addition to the other fabrics that are in the room and the floor. And of course, lastly, a picture with Lola and I, for whom the tapestry is named Lola's Garden, Lola Traficante and I. So now a brief shift. I thought it would be interesting for you to learn a little bit about my latest body of work, The Fragile Bee. This is a body of work that I created between 2014 and 2018. And it's been traveling around the country. It's gone to 9 different venues. And in the end of this month, it will be going to the Hilliard Museum of Art in Lafayette, Louisiana. but it started here in 2015 at the Museum of Art and History in Lancaster, California. The work on the left is called Honey Teachings in the Mother Tongue of the Bees. It's over 100 hexagonal panels with different images of the bees in their cycle of life and flowers, and phrases that remind us to be concerned about the plight of the bees and think what would happen if we didn't have them pollinating our fruits and vegetables. And then on the wall are phrases from newspapers from the last 10 years warning us about the plight of the bees and things that are happening all over the world to either help them or hurt them. And on the right is a very large mural that I created. In this installation, it's 12 feet by 36 feet. Here it is by itself. And the images were taken at the Wildlife Garden at what was then the Rancho Santa Ana Botanical Garden here in Claremont. And this is the legend that tells you which plants are in each of those hexagonal forms. So I shot the garden or the meadow as the background, and then in areas nearby, I inserted detailed images of the flowers so that you could actually see what plants are in the garden at that time. And then these tell you the names of them. So I got to go over and meet with the horticulturists there, and I brought a small image of the meadow photograph and said, you know, what plants are these? I didn't take notes when I was photographing here, and they helped me figure out what the right plant was. Here's a detailed shot of the Honey Teachings multimedia panels. You can see on one, it says, bees are the most ancient source of our connection to food. Hives are being abandoned by the adult female worker bees, imposed over an image of a sculpture of Artemis of Ephesus, who has bees inscribed up the side of the sculpture. These are photographs of bees on roses from my garden. And here's another detail shot. This is what I mean about the phrases on the wall from different newspaper sources. The Case of the Vanishing Bees, February 13th, 2007. I can't read the news source because it's too blurry right now. And this phrase, if bees were to disappear, we would only have a few years to live, has been ascribed to Einstein, but I don't know if that's actually true. And then across this one, it says clothianidin, which is one of the insecticides and fungicides that large agribusinesses use to protect their crops. But it also makes the bees really sick, and in many cases gives the bees dementia, which is why they couldn't find their way home when we were having those severe colony collapse disorders a few years ago, when millions of bees were dying and nobody could understand why. So in addition to fungicides and insecticides, there's also the varroa mite, which gets inside the hive and attaches itself to the bees and even eats through into the cells where the new larvae are and can completely decimate a hive from within. And then there's also the difficulty of trucking bees from the southeast out to California to pollinate the almond groves in February, at which time the bees are on a mono diet of almond pollen for over 6 weeks. And they're also struggling from being awakened in February, which is when they're normally hibernating, as well as being on sugar water until the almond trees have flowered. So it just completely weakens their immune system. And again, many, many beekeepers who raise thousands of hives lose a lot of the bees in that process. And right now, can you believe this? California is the largest producer of almonds for the world, using over 1 million acres of land in the Central Valley. I just think that's kind of phenomenal. At the same time, another body of work in this exhibition is called Botanical Portraits. And I have two suites. The first one is called SoCal, made in 2014 and photographed with plants from Rancho Botanic Garden, which is now the California Botanic Garden in Claremont. So for a year, I nurtured 9 different plants that are bee attracting and drought tolerant and native to Southern California, and photographed them completely during their life cycle, and then used details of those different moments in the life cycle as information in these photographic images. So on the far left is the California poppy, and the one next to that is called the gum plant, and the one next to that is called desert marigold. In this small area, you actually see the plant in situ, and then these other inserts show you the plant as it's developing from bud to bloom to seed. And this one is actually buckwheat. I had one, this one is the sunflower, which I grew in my backyard. That's our beautiful blue sky here in Southern California, and all the details of an amazing sunflower. And this one is called Clarkia ammonia, or Farewell Tonight. And this one is milkweed, which, unbeknownst to me, butterflies had laid eggs underneath the leaves of it because it's one of the favorites of the monarch butterflies. And one day I went outside and there it was, half eaten away and filled with these gorgeous black, white, and yellow caterpillars. Unfortunately, not too many of them made it through the metamorphic stage, you know, in their chrysalis, but this was an amazing thing for me to be able to photograph. Another venue for this exhibition was the Museum of the Southwest in Midland, Texas. This is the museum and the building that it was in. Here's an installation of that work in that location. Here's the honey teachings piece reinstalled in a new place. I went out there and gave a lecture and a workshop, and they had a farmer's market and all sorts of activities going on for kids to learn about bees. The work also went to the Old Capitol Museum at the University of Iowa, and nicely, they had this sweet little bouquet of flowers waiting for me in my room on the left. And interestingly, I actually attended the University of Iowa for one semester when I was beginning college. So it was kind of fun to go back there because I hadn't been there in many years. Then the work went to Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas, in the Reynolds Gallery. And here are some shots of the students that helped install the work and me here giving my lecture, nice pictures with everybody. I spent 3 or 4 days there, and I spent a lot of time with the students, and I had a wonderful time getting to know them and getting to meet them. And here's a shot of a smaller version of the mural. This is only 6 by 18 feet. Not everyone can handle a 12 by 36 foot mural. The work also went to the Irving Arts Center in Irving, Texas, which is quite a beautiful building and was a wonderful installation. And here I sent a different body of work, Fragile Bee 2. It included a new botanical portrait series called Mile High, which I shot at the Denver Botanical Garden. And these are some of the images of the plants there that are different than the plants that we have, but are more native to being at a mile-high altitude. This one's called the blanket flower. This is called golden knapweed. And here are a couple more. These are all about 40 inches square, which you can see in this installation to get a sense of the scale of it. And here's the mural again. And here is my earlier first multi-paneled hexagonal work called the Honeycomb Wall, which I actually made in the early 90s. And the first time it was exhibited was at the Brand Library Museum Gallery in 1994, the same night of the Northridge earthquake. Luckily, nothing was damaged. So I was asked to put together a new Fragile Bee traveling show. And so I had this piece. I thought it would be good to travel this. And I made the second suite of botanical portraits. And I also included the first 10 prime numbers, a suite of prints that I did with Mark Mahaffey in Portland, Oregon, because these have kind of an echo of the idea of hives and clusters, but they are about the first 10 prime numbers. And I'm very pleased to tell you that one of the editions of this suite of work has been acquired by the museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, which, you know, was very gratifying. Here's another example of teaching with the work, and these sweet young students having made their own hexagonal collages, posing for us. And this gentleman, probably a docent, talking to them about the work, asking questions, talking about the phrases, which really helps to start an amazing dialogue. Well, starting from the top, these are all the places the Fragile Bee has journeyed to. And coming up is the Hilliard Museum in Louisiana. And then following that, it's going to the Baylor University's Mayborn Museum, the Phillips Museum in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the Hardin Center for Arts in Alabama, and the Alden B. Dow Museum in Midland Center for the Arts in Michigan, in Midland, Michigan. So this is the end of my conversation with you and my presentation for you. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I'd be happy to answer any questions. You can send me an email, beenance@gmail.com, BEENANCE@gmail.com. So thank you, Beth. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, viewers. I look forward to seeing all you guys in person one of these days soon. Bye-bye.